Albert Einstein was born on March 14th, 1879, in Ulm, Germany. What's funny is that he wasn't some perfect child prodigy. Teachers actually thought he was slow and he didn't speak fluently until around age 4. But as a teenager, his fascination with physics took over, and he eventually ended up working at a patent office in Switzerland. That's where his real genius came out. In 1905, while still a clerk, Einstein published 4 papers that basically flipped physics upside down. One of them introduced special relativity, and from that we got the equation E equals mc squared. It's probably the most famous equation in history, showing that mass and energy are interchangeable. That idea wasn't just abstract science. It underpinned nuclear power and, unfortunately, nuclear weapons. Einstein's influence went way beyond formulas. His general theory of relativity in 1915 explained gravity in a totally new way, not as a force, but as the curvature of space and time. Scientists have been testing and proving it ever since, from observing black holes to using GPS satellites. But Einstein wasn't just about science. He became a global figure. He spoke out against fascism, warned about the Nazis, and later urged Roosevelt to consider nuclear research, which ironically fed into the Manhattan Project. After World War II, though, he turned into one of the loudest critics of nuclear weapons. He also used his platform to fight racism in America, even calling segregation a disease of white people. Einstein once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." That sums him up, a thinker who believed creativity mattered just as much as cold facts. He died on April 18th, 1955 in Princeton, New Jersey. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, later known as Mahatma Gandhi, was born on October 2nd, 1869 in Porbandar, India. He studied law in London, but his defining experiences came in South Africa. There, he was thrown off a train for refusing to leave the whites-only section, and that humiliation lit the fire that shaped his life. Gandhi developed a philosophy he called Satyagraha, which means truth force. It was the belief that ordinary people could resist injustice through nonviolent action. He tested this in South Africa, leading campaigns against racist laws, and then brought it home to India. Back under British colonial rule, Gandhi became the face of Indian independence. His methods weren't flashy battles, but moral ones. In 1930, he led the famous Salt March, walking 240 miles to the sea to make salt in defiance of British law. Simple, but massively symbolic. Millions joined in. Gandhi organized boycotts of British goods, urged people to spin their own cloth, and fasted for days to shame leaders into peace. Why was he so influential? Because Gandhi proved you don't need violence to fight empires. His tactics inspired leaders around the world. Martin Luther King Jr. used his playbook in the American Civil Rights Movement, and Nelson Mandela drew from it in South Africa. Gandhi turned nonviolence into a global strategy for justice. He once said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." That's probably one of the most quoted lines of the 20th century. On January 30th, 1948, Gandhi was assassinated by a Hindu nationalist, but his philosophy didn't die with him. His approach to resistance still influences activists, protests, and movements everywhere today. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in Mvezo, South Africa, into the Thembu royal family. Instead of pursuing a comfortable life, he studied law and got involved with the African National Congress, ANC, fighting against apartheid, the brutal system of racial segregation enforced by the white minority government. Mandela quickly became a leading figure in the anti-apartheid struggle. He originally supported nonviolent methods, but after decades of repression, he helped form the ANC's armed wing. In 1964, he was sentenced to life in prison for sabotage and conspiracy. He spent 27 years behind bars, much of it on Robben Island, where he endured harsh conditions but also became a symbol of defiance. While Mandela was locked up, the global campaign to free him turned him into a household name. When he was finally released in 1990, millions celebrated. Just 4 years later, South Africa held its first democratic elections, and Mandela became the country's first black president. What made him so influential wasn't just his victory, but his approach to leadership. Instead of seeking revenge, he promoted reconciliation. He invited his former enemies into the new government and used symbols like the national rugby team to unite the country. Mandela once said, "I never lose. I either win or learn." That mindset carried him through prison and into politics. He stepped down after one term in 1999 but remained an international figure until his death on December 5, 2013. Mandela's life showed the world that forgiveness and resilience could transform an entire nation. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. He grew up in the segregated South, where Black Americans faced legal and social discrimination in almost every part of daily life. After studying theology and becoming a Baptist minister, King found his real calling in the civil rights struggle of the 1950s and 60s. He first gained national attention during the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. After Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat, King helped lead the boycott that lasted over a year. It showed how collective action could challenge deeply rooted injustice, and it turned King into a leader overnight. King's approach was rooted in nonviolent protest, which he drew partly from Gandhi. He led marches, sit-ins, and demonstrations across the South. His most famous moment came in 1963, during the March on Washington, where he delivered the "I Have a Dream" speech in front of over 250,000 people. That speech is still considered one of the greatest in American history. King's activism was central to passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which legally dismantled segregation and protected Black voting rights. He also spoke out against poverty and the Vietnam War, broadening his focus to global issues of justice. One of his most powerful lines was, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." King was assassinated on April 4, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. His death was a national tragedy, but his vision of equality and justice continues to inspire movements all over the world. Winston Churchill was born on November 30, 1874 in Oxfordshire, England. He came from an aristocratic family and had a long, turbulent political career, serving in various government roles before he became prime minister in 1940 during the darkest days of World War II. At that time, Nazi Germany had overrun much of Europe, and Britain stood almost alone. Churchill's speeches and leadership gave people the courage to keep fighting. His famous words, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall never surrender," captured the spirit of resistance. He played a key role in forging the alliance with Franklin Roosevelt and later Joseph Stalin, which ultimately led to the defeat of Hitler. Churchill wasn't just a wartime figure. He had warned about Hitler's rise long before many others took him seriously. After the war in 1946, he gave his Iron Curtain speech, warning of the Soviet Union's expansion and effectively marking the start of the Cold War. He was also a writer and historian, producing multi-volume works on both world wars, which earned him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953. His career wasn't without controversy. He had colonial views that are heavily criticized today, and he lost the 1945 election, despite leading Britain to victory. Churchill died on January 24, 1965. For many, he remains the embodiment of grit and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, better known as FDR, was born on January 30, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York. He came from a wealthy family and followed in the footsteps of his cousin, Theodore Roosevelt, by entering politics. His career nearly ended in 1921 when he contracted polio, which left him unable to walk unaided. But he refused to quit. In 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, FDR became the 32nd President of the United States. Unemployment was sky high, banks were collapsing, and people had lost faith in the system. His response was the New Deal, a series of programs and reforms designed to stabilize the economy, provide jobs, and regulate finance. Projects like the Tennessee Valley Authority and Social Security left a lasting mark on American life. But FDR's influence stretched far beyond economics. When World War II broke out, he led America from a position of isolation to becoming the arsenal of democracy. His partnership with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin shaped Allied strategy and laid the groundwork for victory. He also became a master of communication, using his fireside chats on the radio to talk directly to Americans and calm their fears. What made Roosevelt so influential was his ability to project confidence during crisis after crisis. He once said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." That line captured his presidency's spirit. Roosevelt was the only American president elected to 4 terms, serving from 1933 until his death on April 12, 1945, just months before World War II ended. His policies redefined the role of government, and his leadership helped shape the modern world order. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, Austria. As a young man, he dreamed of becoming an artist but failed to gain entry into art school. After serving in World War I, he turned to politics, joining the small German Workers' Party, which he quickly transformed into the Nazi Party. By exploiting Germany's economic troubles and national humiliation after the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler rose rapidly. In 1933, he became chancellor, and within months he had dismantled democracy and established a totalitarian regime. His propaganda, fueled by Joseph Goebbels and his paramilitary SS, created a state built on fear, nationalism, and anti-Semitism. Hitler's aggression triggered World War II when he invaded Poland in 1939. Over the next 6 years, his military campaigns engulfed Europe and beyond, leading to the deaths of tens of millions. His ideology also produced the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews along with Roma, disabled people, political dissidents, and others. Why include Hitler in a list of influence? Because his impact was catastrophic, but world-defining. The devastation of World War II reshaped borders, created the United Nations, accelerated decolonization, and set the stage for the Cold War. His crimes changed international law, human rights, and even how nations view authoritarianism. One of his most infamous lines was, "If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed." It summed up the power of propaganda in his rule. Hitler died by suicide on April 30, 1945, as Soviet troops closed in on Berlin. His legacy is one of destruction, a grim reminder of how dangerous unchecked power and ideology can become. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or JFK, was born on May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts. Coming from a wealthy, politically connected family, Kennedy served in World War II as a Navy officer, where his heroics after his boat, PT-109, was sunk, helped launch his political career. In 1960, at just 43, Kennedy became the youngest elected U.S. president. His presidency symbolized energy and optimism, often referred to as Camelot. But his time in office was dominated by Cold War tensions. One of his biggest tests came in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Soviet nuclear missiles were discovered in Cuba. Kennedy chose a naval blockade and intense negotiation over immediate military action. The standoff brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, but Kennedy's handling of it is often seen as a masterclass in crisis management. He also set ambitious goals for the space race, declaring in 1961 that America would land a man on the moon before the decade was out. That speech lit the fuse for the Apollo missions and cemented space exploration as part of modern history. At home, Kennedy began pushing for civil rights legislation, though most of it passed after his death. His charisma and public speaking made him one of the most memorable figures of the century. His most famous quote came from his inaugural address: "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." On November 22, 1963, Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. His short presidency left an outsized legacy, a blend of achievement and myth that still fascinates people today. Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. on January 17, 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky, was more than a boxer. He became a global icon of sport, culture, and resistance. Ali first grabbed attention in 1960 when he won Olympic gold in Rome. 4 years later, he shocked the world by defeating Sonny Liston to become heavyweight champion. His lightning speed, footwork, and brash confidence changed boxing forever. He declared, "I am the greatest," and then backed it up in the ring. But Ali's influence went far beyond boxing. In 1964, he converted to Islam, changed his name to Muhammad Ali, and aligned with the Nation of Islam. His refusal to fight in the Vietnam War, stating, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," led to the loss of his boxing license and a potential prison sentence. He was stripped of his title and missed 3 years at the peak of his career. But he stood firm on his principles, becoming a symbol of resistance to unjust wars and racial inequality. When he returned, Ali became part of some of the most famous fights in history: the fight of the century against Joe Frazier in 1971, the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman in 1974, and the Thrilla in Manila in 1975 weren't just sporting events, they were cultural moments watched around the world. Ali's life was also full of personal moments that reflected his character. In 1981, he famously talked a suicidal man down from jumping off a building in Los Angeles. Later, as Parkinson's disease slowed him physically, he continued to inspire through humanitarian work and public appearances, including lighting the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996. Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on Earth." That captured the second half of his life, devoted to giving back. He died on June 3, 2016, but his mix of athletic brilliance, political courage, and personal charisma made him one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Pablo Picasso was born on October 25, 1881, in Malaga, Spain. A child prodigy in art, he moved to Paris as a young man and became one of the most revolutionary artists of all time. Picasso's career spanned over 70 years, and he produced more than 20,000 works. His early periods, the Blue Period and the Rose Period, already showed emotional depth. But his greatest breakthrough came when he co-founded Cubism with Georges Braque around 1907. By breaking down objects into abstract forms, Picasso completely changed how people saw art. But Picasso wasn't just about style. His works often carried political weight. His most famous painting, Guernica, 1937, captured the horror of the Nazi bombing of a Spanish town during the Spanish Civil War. That mural became an enduring symbol of the tragedies of war and the suffering of civilians. Picasso was also known for constantly reinventing himself, moving from painting to sculpture, ceramics, and design. His restlessness made him one of the most versatile and influential artists in history. He once said, "Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up." Picasso died on April 8, 1973 in France. His art shaped the entire course of modern creativity, influencing not just painters, but architects, designers, and even political activists who used his work as inspiration. That wraps up our list of the top 10 most influential people of the 20th century. But it was impossible to capture an entire century in just 10 names, so there will be a part 2 coming soon with another 10 who absolutely deserve recognition. Who do you think should be in the next list? Drop your picks in the comments. I'd love to see if I've missed anyone.